Good. Can I get a quick cheer in the chat so that I can check the audio quality? So again, good evening one and all. It's Ajay Billav here and I take care of Verzi operations and yet another one more session on UX. I believe you have received the notification for today's agenda and what we are speaking about. Uh, Let me tell you the topic name again. It's a guide to smooth design and develop handoff. I believe most of you might not aware of what exactly this is and why it is useful for. So that is the reason we have today our guest and speaker, Mr. Anirudh, and he'll be helping you out in terms of what you will be learning on the concepts of UX and what it's going to be useful. So just to give you a uh, intro on Anirudh's profile, Anirudh, I believe you have attended our previous webinar. I think he had given you a better insights on the things that you are looking for in terms of scope of UX design and its impact on business. This was the talk that had been completed by Anirudh in the previous session. But as you guys have missed out, if you have missed out, you can check out that particular webinar also. It will give you a proper insights on the things. Just to give a quick information on the mentor's profile, Anirudh had completed his BTech in Thakur College of Engineering, and currently he is working as head of product design in Cyberdrive. And I think what I can tell is he's the best person to provide you a better insights and better knowledge in terms of UX, user experience, what are things that you need to know, what exactly happens in the industry, what you can get out of the knowledge that would be shared in this particular podcast or webinar. So let's not waste much time on this. So I will be handing it over to Anirudh. Anirudh, it's all yours. You can proceed further and you can give our audience a better idea and the things that you would be sharing on today's topic. It's all yours, Anirudh.
Awesome, Ajay. Thank you so much for that quick introduction. So, hey everybody, welcome back to another workshop. So today I'm gonna talk about how do we smoothly hand over the entire design to development. Let me give you a small background of it. We all know that as a UX designer, we have a problem statement that we need to solve. Once to solve that problem statement, there are so many processes that we go through: understanding phase, research phase, design phase, validation phase, and then when your entire research and everything is done, you conclude your entire research to a wireframe than to UI design. Now your work is not done over here. You have to make sure that the entire design, the way you have designed it, has to be pushed directly to the market. So in order to make that sure that the way you have designed your entire UI has to be pixel perfect and has to be same when you go to the customer, you have to make sure that you do the entire handover to the developer in certain manner. And to do that, I'm going to have this session, a guide to smooth design development hands-on. It's going to be quite interactive session. So guys, feel free to ask whatever question that you have. And with that thought in mind, I'm going to start with my small introduction. Like Ajay already said, I'm a product designer. Basically, I am an engineer. I'm a self-taught designer, developer turned into a UX designer. So I have more than 7.5 years of core design experience. My area of expertise lies into system design, UX design, end-to-end product design, micro interactions, micro animations, and reusable components. My entire research and in my entire experience goes like this. I have more than 7.5 years of code design experience. I've designed more than 8 Android iOS app, which has more than 5 million downloads. I have designed more than 20 websites, which has more than 20 million active users at this very moment. Then here are some of my achievements. Last year, I was among top 10 leaders across the globe. In January 2022, I was among the top one mentor globally. With that thought in mind, to reach out to more people, I go forward and started my own YouTube channel. I started doing workshop across the globe, and this is what I've got: 28 days and 21K views on YouTube. So that's what the appreciation from all the UX community that I've got. And recently, just a week ago, I got to be the mentor of the month across the globe with top 1% mentorship, and I've completed 1,000 minutes of mentorship on ATP list for the month of May. So with that thought in mind, that was all about me. With all the amount of knowledge that I have, I'm more inclined and keen towards sharing it to the global audience and making sure that it's a good time to give back to the community, because I think I'm at a very good space where I have practical knowledge about UX UI design. So with that thought in mind, let's get started with the today's topic. So what are we covering today? Let's just see some of the basic topics out over here. We're going to talk about some basics of dev terminologies. How do developers talk? You might always seen about the jargons, APK, API, this, that, and you always wonder that what is it all about. So we're going to talk about some basics terminology before we get started in the process. We're going to talk about how do we deal with design tech limitations. What are design tech limitation as such? I'm going to explain you with example. I'm going to share you a few links, so stay back. Then the overall design development hands-on. How do we actually give the entire design to the developer, and how do we make sure that the design is developed in a very optimized way? Going forward, we're going to see assets home handover to the developer. Now, every time you create your design, it has illustrations, icon, so many other assets, video, GIF, MP4. So what is the actual format that you need to share to the developer when it goes to website, when it goes to Android versus when it goes to iOS, so that you know the 360-degree view of the asset handover also. Going forward, we have the last thing, asset optimization. That how do we optimize the entire assets that the overall load on the website is doesn't be very high. It can quickly load. It has to be optimized. Going forward, let's start with the basic terminologies. There is a small keyword section that I have over here, and I'm going to quickly take out my pen and explain each and every keywords in detail. Let me know if you guys are stuck somewhere, you want me to repeat something. Let's just try to have a very interactive section. So I'm going to talk with the CTA. Anyone who wants to widely guess what is CTA? Anyone? Anybody on the chats quickly want to widely guess what is a CTA? Anybody? No worries. Let's go forward. Your CTA means a call to action or click to action. When you say call to action, it says nothing but your actual buttons. So your CTA is always nothing but your standard button. So a developer will always say, hey, what is the use of this CTA? What is this? What does the CTA do? Where is the primary CTA? Where is the secondary CTA? So you need to understand, if they are saying CTA, it's nothing but call to action, and it's nothing but your actual buttons. Then there is something called as an API. So API is nothing but application programming interface. Now, why do you bother to know that? So let me explain you with the example of a restaurant. So every time you go to a restaurant, when you sit down there and ask for order, let's say there is a waiter that comes and tell you, sir, what would you like to have? If you say there is, let's say P1, P2 as an example that you would want to order, the waiter will go back to the back where the restaurant is there, where they are cooking. They will go to the chef and tell them the chef that, hey, we want P1, P2. Now P1, P2 will be bring by the waiter and given back to the users. So similarly, your actual API works. What happens is every time you use a product, all the data that you see on your app, your information architecture, your images, your data, your product description page, everything is stored somewhere onto the cloud, which is known as your infrastructure also. So the data accessibility over here is taken care of by APK, which is nothing but application programming interface. So anything that you request, if you go and click on a login page, you have your ID password, the APK will go and check if this user ID or password is there onto the cloud or not, which is nothing but the backend system. And it will verify and say, hey, this is a valid user, your logins is successful. Similarly, we have something called as CX. CX is nothing but on customer experience. You might always heard about UX, UI. So customer experience is a larger bucket which undercomes and has some keywords like UX, UI within it. Now, customer experience talk about the end-to-end cycle of a consumer. For example, 360-degree view. It's not about the app. It's not about the interface that you use. It's about all the touch points, all the single touch point via which a consumer can come in touch with your brand, which can be, for example, a website, can come through Google advertisement, can come through an offline navigation, can come through some other advertisement, word of mouth. So no matter where, what the path the user is using, you make sure that the overall consistency has to be happening over there. And that's why we make sure that the CX of the product is consistent. So means the customer experience of the product is consistent. And for that, we make sure that typography is same, the colors are same, the brand tonality is same, overall uses of iconography, overall uses of the illustration is same across the globe, and you do not keep it increasing new and new. There is something called as favicon. If you can see over here at Figma also, if I can just give you a quick screenshot over here, you can see there is something as this icon. So this icon is nothing but a fav icon over here, which you need to understand that every time you want to give a developer, every time you want to go back and give to a developer an information or an icon for this, you're gonna make sure that you give it in the terms of fav icons. Just give me a moment. Okay, so you want to give it in the format of fav icon. So your fav icon is nothing but a small browser oriented icon, which is nothing, goes into 16 pixel by 16 pixel. That's all. Then there is something called as 404. Now 404 is nothing but a very smaller section known as your error states. Similarly, in developer, there is 503, there is 402, there is so many error codes. So every time a developer says that, hey, what is the screen for 404? Which means what if user is looking out for something and that is not available? What do I do? So you need to make sure that you create a screen for that. What if there is no internet? What do I do? You need to create an empty states or an error states for that. So something like this, the element that you're looking for it is not found. Go back to the home page or refresh. Then there is something called as CSS. Now CSS is nothing but a cascaded styling shape. Now a developer will always develop your website in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So your CSS always tends out to be the actual style guide. Let's say if you have a button and you want to put out a literally, yes, 404 page not found, literally a border radius to it. You want to put it as a very nice pink color. You want it to have a ripple effect like Google material design. You want it to be hovered. It has to be increased. Everything can be done with the help of CSS and transform position. Now, what about server? So what happened is server is nothing but a cloud storage where all your data is stored. It's just a cloud storage. Now, what will happen is again, anything that you see over here on your app, everything is stored onto the data. And with the previous example, same can be accessed by API. So only this section is going to be technically high for you guys. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Rest everything is going to be pretty simple. There is something called first fold. There is something called as an ATF. So ATF is nothing but the above the fold. Now that if you go to any specific website, let me open a quick website for you. Let's say Zomato. So if I go to a website called Zomato, everything that I see on my screen right now is ATF, which is above the fold or first fold. The moment I start scrolling down from collection, it's BTF or the second fold, which is nothing but the below the fold. So that's what ATF and BTF is all about, above the fold and below the fold. You need to make sure to keep this thing in mind every time you're designing a website or a landing page. So ATF is very important in terms of your landing pages. BTF is also very important. That comes eventually. Then there is something called as a bug. Bug is nothing but an issue or error that developers identify. Let's say the developer might say, hey, if I click on this button, it doesn't go to real page. What's the issue? It is an actual bug out there. And that's what we need to go and rectify it eventually. Sitemap is more like same as your actual information architecture, having the data about all the website. What are the list of the pages? How many people are there? What are we doing right now? Where does this lead to? Where does this lead out to going forward? That's all your sitemap is all about. Your wireframe, we all are aware of, is just an early stage ideation of your solution, which can be low fidelity, which can be high fidelity, which can be medium fidelity. Then there is something called as a conversion. Now conversion is nothing but X number of people coming on your website versus X number of people clicking on your link. So let's say there are 20 people who are coming on your website and the actual intention of your product was to click on sign up page and only 10%, 10 users are clicking. So the conversion ratio is nothing but 50%. So you have to make sure that the conversion ratio is always high, and that's why you have to make sure that the overall customer experience is nice. The first full is very well done. The overall information architecture is nicely done. There is something called as a backend. Now, backend and front end is a very simple method. When you talk about UI, your UI is always your front end. So there is a developer called front end who is going to do UI for you. Everything that you see in your apps right now is nothing but a front end. And everything that comes data from a cloud is your backend. Bounce rate, it's a very important keyword to remember while you're designing for a website or so called so forth. Let's say there are 100 people who are coming on your website and 50 people leaves your website on the ATF without clicking on anything. So the bounce rate is very high. People will come and they don't understand what to do. They will close the tab quickly, and that's why your bounce rate is very high. You have to make sure that to have an actual proper conversion ratio, you have to make sure that bounce rate is really very low, very single low. Then going forward, there is something called as a build. Build is nothing but eventually in development language, if you ever tell your developer that, hey, whatever you have developed from my design, can I get to see it? I want to test it. So the developer will say, okay, here's a build. Now the build is basically a actual build which can go live to the market, which is a production build, or it can be nothing but a staging build. So staging build is actually your website that will go live to the user, but right now hosted on some random URL where you can go and test the product. Once you say that product do not have any bugs and it is as same as our actual design, we can put it back to the production. And then once you put it back to the production, it will be available for the users. Now second fold and BTF is one and the same, something that you see below your fold. So that was a very quick introduction about the keywords. I'm going to move forward to actual limitations and all. So do we have any questions over here? Hey, Shruti, good evening. Do we have any questions right now for us? Any questions? Yes, Ajay. Can we take a minute to ask any question that we have?
Sure, I guess. Just so Mohammed Hanis asks that is the API similar to use case diagrams?
Yes, definitely. But usage diagram is something that we do as a UX UI designer. API is more like an actual programming interface or the infrastructure that is used by the developer. But it's more like the same in terms of concept. Joshna
In,
says call to action. Nice. Mohammed 404 error page not found right. Any other question that we have, Ajay? Anyone? You have
I
any
think
quick question?
that's all, I guess.
Awesome.
Yeah, audience, please get yourself updated with few more questions so that it can be interactive, and any minute thing that you have, you can shoot it out. That won't be an issue.
Right, right. The moment I'm taking the section over here, you can definitely put your questions over there. Ajay will help us get that question to me and I'm going to answer that for you. Going forward, let's just talk about design tech limitation. Now, design tech limitation is very critical and you need to understand this. Now, what happened is a lot of time when you do design, you might create an hypothetical solution, mostly say non-dribble, which is not feasible to develop by a developer within a given amount of time frame. So that's why you need to understand that design limitation does exist. This is not possible within a feasible time or feasible development area. That's why we have to make sure that going forward, always make sure that all your developers are included in your design in an early stage. So that's why I'm going to talk about scenario number one. Let's say cross-browser compatibility issue. Now, what does cross-browser compatibility issue means? I know for like next 10-15 minutes, it's going to be a bit tech heavy, but it's something that you need to understand to go to the next level as a UX designer. It's always important to understand how the tech work. It's not at all necessary to know how to do a coding language, but it's essential to know how this technology works. So that's why going forward, here we need to understand cross-border compatibility. Let's just say if you ever used some component or design or UI or animation, you need to go back to the developer and say, hey, what do you need to develop this thing into an actual live product? So let's say developer would say there's a function called calci, there's a function called trim, there's a function called transformation, whatever the function is required, you need to go there and let them know that can we have a quick cross-browser compatibility test, because something that works on Chrome browser not necessarily will work on a Firefox or a Mozilla Firefox as a browser, or maybe it not work on the Apple or iOS browser itself. So that's why we need to make sure that it's visible on Chrome, it's visible on Safari, it's visible on Opera Mini, it's visible on your Firefox also. So there is this beautiful website called Can I Use? I'm gonna quickly share a screen for it. You can go to caniuse.com. Whatever the function that you're using, you can write the function with the help of your developer, and you can see now Can I Use, which is a calculator for let's say height and width, which can also be used for scalable typography. So you can see that it supports, let's say, your Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, all the latest version out here is supported. Now we can see if something is not supported out here. Opera Mini, it doesn't support any of it. So we need to identify that is our product also going to be used by people on Opera Mini? If yes, there's a cross-browser compatibility issue, and we need to take care. We need to identify if there are more of the users from Google Chrome or not. And similarly, we can take a call. So it's always important to make sure that your developers are always in sync with your early stage of design. Then there is something called as a scenario number two, actual tech design limitation. So let me give you an example right now why it is important to involve your developer early in this stage. So let's say your actual issue right now is to solve a problem statement where your company is telling you that we need to reach out to the people who are sitting in shop. They have so many calculation to be made, there are so many entries to be made. We need to make it actual digital right now. And how do we do that? Let's just solve through an UX UI solution. So you are very happy, you're like, okay, cool, I can do that. And you propose the solution saying that, hey, whatever it is written in a hard coded handwriting language, what I can do is we can create an artificial intelligence algorithm that will scan the entire page, and everything that is written can be converted to digital. I have seen its work. That's perfectly fine, man. That's a solution that you're giving as a UX designer. But you need to make sure that before you work on that solution, go back and discuss with your design team and development team that this is what I'm proposing as a solution. Do you think it's good or not? Because now your developer will be like, hey, to do that there is something called an OCR, optical character recognition, which is it will recognize the character, convert the actual handwritten notes into digital product. But then the developer will like, hey, in order to make that we need to write our own algorithm, and to write that is going to take a lot of time. If we use Google's algorithm, it's also not accurate up to 100%. It's something around 98 to 99 or 95%, and there's so many difficulties out there. If the words are in, let's say, multilingual language, we won't be able to do that. So that's why it's always important to go back and talk to a developer and see the feasibility of your solution. Never have a constraint before proposing a solution. Never. Just think out of the box, go as crazy as you can. But the moment if you go forward and see it, make sure that you talk to a developer. So even in the future, if you're working on any of the product, let's say metaverse or something like that, that's something that you want to create a very hypothetical situation which you think is going to be a very awesome blossom experience for the users. That's perfectly fine, man. You do all the wireframe sketching on early stage ideation as in sketching. Don't make the UI and then go back and talk to a developer that this is what I'm looking forward to. How feasible do you think this is? And if it's at all feasible, go forward and do the solution. So I'm moving for that's all about tech design limitation. I'm going to the main process of design development hands-on. Till time, if you have any question, feel free to put that in the comment. Ajay will help us solve that question. So moving forward with the main topic for the day, what is design development handoff? And if you have question, keep it up yourself. We're gonna have an entire Q&A session at the end of this session also, like say 5-10 minutes or 15 minutes for all the questions. Moving forward, let's talk about the essential. Now when you talk about the essential, every time you want to give your entire solution to the designer, you need to make sure that you give the entire walkthrough of the design to your developer, so that your developer knows what you're designing, which screens leads to what, how many screens are there, how many empty screens, error screens, how many home screens are there. The developer should be aware of the entire scenario that you're doing. And to support it in more details, you can create an entire working prototype and give it back to the developer. This is how you want to make sure that, hey, if you're ever confused about what does it do, where does it lead to, go forward and just click on the prototype and you can see the entire working prototype of it. Then going forward, last important step, which is the topic for the day, Zeppelin and Figma for visual documentation. You said visual design or visual documentation, Figma or Zeppelin can be used. Point number two is your prototyping. What happens with prototyping is that you go to Figma, you can create an interactive prototype, which is actually clickable version of your design, which will actually be developed. So you can replicate in any prototyping tool, be it XD, be it Figma, be it Prototype, be it Framer. You can recreate the entire thing right now and you can show that to the developer. So a lot of time when I present my designs to my stakeholders and all the other people, I make sure that not only design, but I have an entire clickable prototype which I can show to my stakeholders. And again, so that's what it's all about, working prototype. Going forward, Zeppelin and Figma. So right now, let's talk about Zeppelin. How do we do it? Second important point, you can go to the Zeppelin. How do we do that? You can literally go back over here. You can search for, let's say, Zeppelin. There is this awesome website, Delivery Promise. You can actually download this plugin, get started for free. I have downloaded this already. You can see over here. Once this is done, we can go back to the Figma. You click over here, you go back to community page and just click for Zeppelin. So you have to install one application on your device and one plugin in your Figma. So here you see, I have already installed Zeppelin over here in my thing. And all you need to do is go forward and create one project on Zeppelin. And what are the options that you get at Zeppelin is you can either create a website, iOS or Android app. Now what happens is we need to understand the fact that every time you create an website or you create an application or Android or you create an iOS website, the actual scalable things over here are different, like scalable SP or DP scalable component. There's pixel, there is PT, which is point in iOS. So the measuring units are quite different for each and everything. So that's why you don't have to worry about anything, because Figma will only allow you to design your UI in pixels. And that's what the Zeppelin is more about. You can actually create over here and the dimension will be automatically converted to point. or Shift or anything that is available for your Android or iOS as a component. So I'm going to go forward. Let's say we created one single project website. Now what I can do is I can click on plugin and install it. So now that my plugin is installed, I can just create one single artwork. Let's say there is this design that I've created real quick, some random boxes over here. Now, if I want to upload it, all I need to do is click on frame, right click on plugins. You can go from here also to the plugin top. You can click on Zeppelin. The moment you click on Zeppelin, if you see Zeppelin is loading out here. So if you have signed in or logged in, you will be asked the project that you want to upload your file into, which is for example over here. So I click on plugin, I create all my frames, no matter how many frames we have, because most of the screen has so many screens, right? 500 to 600 screens, that's perfectly fine. You can select multiple screens. Let me show you real quick. If I have this, let's say I have so many screens right now. I'm going to select all the screen, frame 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll go back and I'll click on Zeppelin. I can upload all the screens all over again. It is that simple as that. You don't have to worry about any single thing. Going forward, once you click on plugin, this is what you will get as an option, which is then export option. So the moment you click on export, it will ask you which project do you want to export it into. So this is some of the project that you already have in Zeppelin. So let's say Android application, iOS, or a website. So the moment you click on the project and export it, this is going to export the entire design and give you a single link in Zeppelin. So this is how Zeppelins look like over here. So this is the project that I have. You can create a project from here. There is the style guide that I can upload over here. So let's go back and see what does here go. So once you share the URL with the developer, that's the only thing that you need eventually. So this URL can be go back and share to the developer, and developer can start doing it from then and there. Let's see what is the view that developer gets. So the moment you share this link, which is zeppelin.io and let's say bwmvvy, you share this link with the developer. The moment the developer opens this screen, this is what you get to see as a developer. So here is the entire screen. There is the clickable asset. You can click on any of this thing. Let's say go forward. I'm going to show you a real bit over here. This is how it looks like, right? There is an actual Zeppelin link over here. There is a Figma link also, so the developer can actually click on file also to access the Figma file directly. Developer can click on Zeppelin also to share it on again, and developer can click on any of the component to see its coding language out over here. Do we have any quick questions so far? I'm going to take a small break, really 4-5 minutes break or so. If you have any question before I move to other topic, this is what we are talking about. Any quick question, guys? Ajay, let me know if you have any questions in chat.
Let me check.
Mhm.
Uh, Vaishali Verma asks to repeat the essential process.
Okay, awesome. So essential process over here is that you need to make sure that follow three important steps. First of all your design that you have created, it might have 40 screens, 50 screens, or 80 screens. Give a small walkthrough to your developer saying that, hey, this is what I have been going through. This is what I have designed right now. Create an entire prototype. Now, walkthrough can be simple. You just open your Figma file over here and just give a walkthrough to all the screens that you have designed and developed right now. And second is clickable prototype. Your Figma, your prototyping skills in Figma has to be very good going forward, because this is one single tool that will allow you to do design, UX, UI, prototyping, give it to the developer. So all you need to do is create a clickable prototype, which is, for example, if I go out here, if I have multiple screens over here, I'll just go backwards. Over here. So if I create any single screens over here, you guys can see I just create one single artboard, another single artboard. I can literally click on this screen over here and click over and see prototype. So I can say on click, you need to go to the screen, navigate. You can have all the animations out here. Smart animation, easy is easy on. You can actually customize the entire spring also. How fast or slow do you want your animation to be eventually? Wobble effect, anything. If you can see whatever I'm doing right now is changing out there, right? So you can actually do it slow and steadily and see how you want your actual interaction to be, right? So that's what prototype is all about. And then last is Zeppelin, which is the flow I showed right now. In Zeppelin, create the project. You download the Zeppelin tool. You download the entire tool for Figma as a plugin. You create a project, create the number of frames that you want to upload. Click on upload to Zeppelin. Go forward and upload it to Zeppelin. This is how your view is going to be all like. This is what your developer gets to see. Any other question, Nachai? Any other questions that we have?
One question from the viewer, that is, I think in the initial part you have mentioned how bug can be rectified and reported, right? So any mode or anything that you can tell to the viewers how it has to be rectified or brought to the notice of UI
Sure, sure,
designer.
sure. Sure, sure, sure. So basically, there is something called known as a UAT process, which is user acceptance process. Now, if UAT process means that everything that you design or develop and is a final product, you have to make sure that you test the entire product end to end. There is something called as an automation testing, which the QA person also does. There is something called as a UX UI designer, UAT testing, which we and all the stakeholders does. So let's say there is a purpose of your app is to do an online food ordering. You will make sure that you do the entire process end to end together in a call, and every single time when you're stuck at something, you're going to start noting down all the issues out there, and then you create a bug list, which is Jira as a bug ticket management tool. It's a software management tool, Jira. You upload the entire bug with the details, documentation, screenshot, everything that is wrong, and that will be assigned to a developer, and the developer will go forward and rectify those bugs out there. And in order to make sure that, if you want to overcome the cross browser compatibility issue, there is a beautiful website called Can I Use. You can definitely go out there and use this website, so you get to know all the screens, which are all the browser is supported by a function that I'm going to use. So this is what it's all about. Any other questions,
I
Ajay?
think that's all, I guess, Anirudh.
Awesome, awesome. Keep your questions. Go ahead, guys. Can you explain essential in Telugu? No, Joshi, I'm not good at Telugu. I'm so sorry.
Uh,
Uh,
Just, I think we will have a different session, or else we'll try to resolve it in Telugu from a different executives or from our end. Okay.
Definitely, definitely. What I can try to do is, Ajay, if I'm sharing a screen, sharing a chat, my links on uh, Zoom, you can share that. If you guys wanna get in touch with me on LinkedIn, let me know if you have any other question. I'm just sharing my socials out there. So if you don't mind, Ajay, can you share that with the people?
Definitely, definitely.
Sure.
So, anyways, guys, we will be sharing Anirudh's LinkedIn profile, so you can definitely interact with him. He would be able to answer you guys.
So don't worry, Joshna, I'll definitely rectify your issues. Don't worry about it. I can use other languages and medium also. So moving forward, now is the most important part right now, which is assets handover. So I'm going to quickly take a glance to see what we have done. We try to understand that what is the basics terminology as CTA, your sprint, what is your ATF, BTF, bug. Then we try to understand the tech design limitation, where we concluded that we need to go forward and work with the developer really very closely. Then this was the design development hands off. You actually create the entire prototype of the product. You give a development an actual walkthrough of the design, and then you use Zeppelin to hand over the design. Right now we are talking about the asset handover. Now when you talk about asset handover, every time you develop or design something, there are so many icons and illustration that you are using, right? That's why we need to make sure that what is we need to do when it is a website, what do we need to do when it's an application, what do we need to do is an Android versus iOS. So that is what we're going to discuss right now. Going forward, there are three important buckets to understand. What do I do for website? What do I do for Android versus iOS app? So going forward, I'm going to show you a real quick screenshot of it, that how do we do it. Let's say if I talk about website, this is how you can export your thing. If I have an entire, let's say a screen over here, I have this, let's say an icon. All you need to do is I can click on design. I can click this icon and I can export this as PNG, JPEG, SVG, PDF, whatever plugin that you want to export as, you can click over here and export it. So the moment if you go there and export this entire frame to the Zeppelin, this is how you're gonna get an option. So if the people click on that icon, let me take you back to this screen. So if the developer click on this icon over here, this is a small illustration. This is what the view the developer will get. So developer can click on the icon and download the entire asset for free. He don't have to come back to you that, hey, I need the icon, I need the illustration. That would be done by Zeppelin itself. Here is an icon. Here's what you can download. You can download it as an PNG, SVG, whatever you want. So this is how it's going to happen in pixels out over here. Let's go forward and we talk about this also Android. So the DP, which is density pixels out over here. So again, you PNG and web JP is going to be there as your Android application. Here you can see web PNG switches out over there. Then going forward, there is again something called as an iOS one. So same, now this is converted into point system. This is converted into, let's say, DP system, density pixel, and this is into the normal pixels, which is nothing but a normal web development pixel. So that's why you need to just export one time, and Zeppelin will take care of all the conversion of the ratio. You don't have to worry a single thing about, oh, how do I convert SP to DP, DP to point, or point to pixel? No, man, you don't have to worry about anything. all you need to do is just design it into pixels in your Figma file. So this is how you export it for it. Then here is the iOS version also. So if you can see over here, they also provide the list view. Now Swift is a language that is used for iOS development. Coming over here, XML is it's more like a language like Kotlin and Java to create UI component in Android. Going forward, this is a CSS like we discussed in your keywords, right? The CSS is nothing but cascaded styling sheet, which is used by the developer to create the image tag that can be used. Here is the icon over here. Here is the icon.svg, which is over here. So that's how the developer will download the entire asset, and there's no issue that we'll be ever facing with the development over there. So let's go forward and talk about something more as an asset design optimization. So right now, if you guys are stuck somewhere, if you have any question, please let me know. Going forward with this, now what happened is I'm going to give you an example of cross-browser compatibility issue also. Now something that you see over here is WebP. Okay, so let's say there is something as a WebP. I'm going to zoom it for you real quickly. Now what happens is as a cross-browser compatibility issue also, now WebP is something that is nothing but a format given by, let's say, Google. So let's say my image is my dp.webp. Now webp is given by google.com itself. Now it is nothing but a compression image. So you need to go share and make sure if your size of the image is very high. Now webp and Google Translator will allow you to compress the entire image into a very smaller format. Let's say something around 3 MB or so and so forth. It can convert it, let's say something to 100 KB or 200 KB, which is more like if you have higher the number of resources, thus in terms of size, the higher the time it takes to load. So lower the number of resources in size, the faster it load. So that's why you have to make sure that overall the sizing factor has to be really very low. So now WebP, what happened was when I was working 2 years ago, now WebP was properly working in Chrome as a browser, but it was not working as a Safari browser. Okay. So in Safari browser, it would give you an error that WebP is not supported, and that is again a cross-browser compatibility issue. So if that moment 2 years ago, if I had that much amount of knowledge about checking the cross-browser compatibility issue, I would have understand that Safari will not allow it. So again, I had to export two format. One was PNG as an asset, which is portable network images graphic, which is used over here just like JPEG, and then I'll go for WebP over here. So that's why you need to understand that you need to make sure that go forward and talk to a developer very synchronously every single time. You make sure that your entire development team is into the process while you're designing or developing something. And right now, today, let's say it's been a year or so, it is resolved for both. Now WebP is totally awesomely working in all the profile, everything over there. If I just quickly show you an example of that, let's say if I go to adplus.com, let's say if I go to view profile, if I let's say open on my image, so it will directly download, and you can see it's a web EP, nothing but web EP. So that's what, see how fast the entire website was loaded, quickly the image was downloaded. That is the power of compression by Google. That's why you have to make sure that convert and know the actual conversion ratios also out here. Going forward, design optimization. Now every time you want to create icons for you, make sure that you go back and create SVG icons for your website. If your website has iconography that do not have any gradient color, it's a solid single color, make sure that you stick to SVG, actual scalable vector graphics. So when I say about SVG, let's say this image is a PNG or WebP right now. If I literally scroll it to our larger extent, you can see it's pixelated right now, right? It's pixelating. But at the same time, if I create something like this as an SVG, which is a vector based image, the best part about vector is no matter how many times you scroll it, if you zoom it to the cloud, if you zoom it to the moon, it's never gonna break, it's never gonna get pixelated. See, it's 4,000 pixel, 49,000 pixel, it's still not getting blurred. So that's the advantage. If you ever want to go about it, make sure that you go for SVG icons only. WebP for images like I showed you right now, so this will not break because it's an vector images. Then SVG animation over GIF and video. Now we need to understand that SVG is nothing but a path animation. If you ever export an SVG, let's say if I create this rectangle, I write A over here, quickly zoom it out for you guys real quick to show something is a hands off also over here. Let's say if I take 1,000, click over here, I press A, and reduce it over here real quick. And let's say I go back and put it into an outline converter. So let's say if I outline the stroke, I select entirely. I can copy, just paste, and I'm just gonna export this as SVG. I'm gonna export, just go back on my desktop real quick. So here I'm exporting, let's say, image img. Now if I go back to my desktop real quick, I can see this is an SVG right now, right over here. But if you can see, it's nothing, you can't see anything over here. But if I put the same to the browser real quick, this is how the SVG turns out to be. It's very scalable and optimized right now. So that's why you have to make sure that everything that you do does to be into your system. People after a point will definitely broken down. If I go back and say, let's say PNGs, and I'm going to export both to the Figma. So let's say there is one PNG, there is one SVG. So now if you see, there is this SVG right now. If I actually zoom the entire PNG, after a point, it will start breaking it out. But if you see, if it's an SVG, I can literally still edit it, open the illustration independently. I can change the color of it because it's nothing but a vector path. And vector path can be edited at any given moment. So that's why optimized illustration and icon should always go in your SVGs and not in anything. Now, when you talk about video and GIF, make sure that SVG animation is preferred over GIF. So I'm going to show you a real example of it. There is something called as a treatshot.in that I did a couple of years ago. So if you see treatshot, the very first page over here, if you guys can see, it's small SVG animation. Something is loading out here, right? If I really quick go back to the inspect element and I can just click on this. If I click over here, you can see that it's total SVG right now. Here are the code of that image over here. It's all vector path definition. This is the path over here. If you guys can see, the path is constantly changing. That's all. So that's why it's important that you go ahead and do the vector animation if possible, rather than putting a GIF. Because GIF, after a moment, when you actually zoom the entire screen, or if your device goes to a larger extent, it will start breaking. But when you talk about SVG, if you see, I have zoomed it so much, it's still not breaking out because it's an SVG animation. So that's why always try to prefer SVG animation over your actual animations or GIF, because GIF is also going to break eventually. Then there is something called as a latte animation, which is basically if you want to provide an entire interaction, let's say click interaction, success interaction for your developer, which is going to be in your Android and iOS thing, there is something called as a latte animation. It's a perfect library that is given by Airbnb. You can go to lotteanimation.com. You can learn it. All you need to do is make sure that you create an entire interaction over here and make sure that you export it as a JSON file. Now, JSON file is nothing but a small code. Let's say if I go back there and let's say preview something, there is a JSON file. So if I ever develop and design something in JSON file, you can drag drop and you can see the actual interaction over here. So very first single step to do that is you can go back and create some icon illustration. Let's say step number one, you can go and create an icon illustration. Let's say SVG. You can export that to your After Effect. And in After, you can do all your illustration and animation work out over here. Once that is done, there is a beautiful plugin called Body Moving. Okay, Body Moving. It's a free plugin. You can download it. Now, Body Moving will, what will do is all the animation that you did in After Effect will be converted into .json file, because in After you can export it as GIF file also. You can export it as an MP4 also. You can export it as a video properly. Now, video will be very huge and very heavy in terms of sizes. That's why .json file is very lightweight, 500 KB or 600 KBs. So you can use that. So if you ever want to know more about it, let me know. I can connect on LinkedIn also. So that was all about the day, guys. Thank you so much for this. We can head down to the Q&A session right now. Yes, Ajay, let's take it forward.
Great, great, Anirudh. I believe for few audience it might be a bit technical part, but if you have gone through it or if you are eager to learn more about it, right? So it might be just a start or beginning for you that I would like to tell. And immediately going to the Q&A sessions, uh, guys, I can see few questions that has been resourced already while taking the registrations. And if you
Mhm.
have anything more in terms of the understanding that you had, or else in terms of the career opportunities that you want to start with, right? So you can definitely shoot those things also in the chat. We would be eager to answer that. Coming back to the questions, Anirudh. So there is a resource question that we have selected. How to reduce the bounce rate and what all factors does it affect it?
Exactly. So bounce rate, to everybody who is not that technical, I'll repeat it very quickly. Bounce rate is basically the number of people who is coming to your actual website and goes back without clicking anything. That is the number of bounce rate. So number of people visited versus who haven't clicked anything, that's your bounce rate. So if your bounce rate is high, means nobody's clicking on your website, means your conversion ratio is down. So what you need to do is make sure that you put your layout, your first ATF, in a very clear manner, that this is what I like. Huge heading out here, small paragraph, a huge button out over here, a form click out there, where the user has a clear indication of what is the next step that needs to be done. Let's say we talk about NFT, invest in NFT with one single click. No more about the investment. One big investment button out here, invest now, and a small button saying that no more, and maybe a video or a GIF out there, SVG animation, that is talking about it, or maybe just one single image. That would be your ATF. Your bounce rate will always be calculated on ATF and first fold. So that's why make sure that whatever message that you want to communicate in least amount of time. Make sure that it doesn't have any cognitive load, doesn't have any learning curve. Because if you try to change the layout in random way and not put it as standard, like we know Jacobi's law, make sure that everybody, people who are used to the layout, make sure you use the same layout going forward. So if you introduce something new, that's gonna increase the learning curve of the user. Oh my god, what's this? There's some random button is floating here and there. So make sure that you reduce the overall reinvention of the work. Keep it straight to the point, keep it as small as possible in terms of content. Don't put an entire paragraph. Everything else that you want to communicate, you can have a floating let's say chevron or a drop down icon over here, which can take you to the BTF, which is the second fold, and there you communicate all your, let's say, testimonials, user feedback, benefits, pricing model. But ATF has to be as clean as possible, as straightforward as possible, so that you communicate the entire message very quickly.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Great. I believe that answers the question. And quickly moving to the next one, as the topic says, right? Today's agenda says. So on that itself, why is a smooth design handoff is necessary? Like, is it totally necessary, and what is its impact?
Definitely. It's very important to be very honest, because what happen is a lot of time when you don't do the smooth design handoff to the developer, if you don't give them the entire walkthrough of the product, you don't give the entire clickable prototype, a lot of time it may happen that you click on some button, that button is going out somewhere. If you don't give the actual asset downloading and actual padding margin to the developer, the icon would be exported randomly from the website. It is going to export as a PNG, and the SVG wouldn't be exported. Developer will go back to the Figma and download it by themselves. So there are so many constraints that happens if you don't do it smoothly by following all the steps that I showed right now. So in order to reduce the overall error rate, which you see in the final design, and to have a pixel perfect design the way that you do, because if you just sit back and relax for a minute and think about the efforts that you take to create an entire UI, there's so longer process, like we discussed, that there's a huge process that you do to create some UI. And let's say just one single step of developing it in a wrong manner, what is going to be the impact? The users are not going to get an optimal solution, they're going to get a suboptimal solution. It's loading a lot of time, it's taking so many assets, rather than using a JSON file the developer has directly exported as, let's say, MP4, and it's loading very high, and it's not using WebP, it's using PNG and SVG in terms of that. So you can rectify those issue and make sure to create a pixel perfect UI the way that you have done. And that's why I always make sure that I export my entire style guide differently, and I export my design differently, so that the developer knows this is how the button look, this is how the hover state, this is how the click state, this is how the, let's say, disable states looks like. So that's why, to overall reduce the turnaround time between creating something and fixing something and giving an optimized solution, a smooth design development hands-off is very important.
Great, great. That answers, Anirudh. And as you have mentioned, right, the collaborative mindset that has to be developed within the team, right? So, as you have told, if you have to hand over to the developer or the designer, like what kind of collaboration that initially both the parties should have, what kind of rules that they need to follow, Anirudh?
Mhm. Right. If let's say I'll start from the problem statement. Once the
Mhm.
problem statement is given by a stakeholder to the product
Mhm.
manager does all the documentation, which is
Mhm.
PRD, project requirement document. The project requirement document is now shared with the design lead and the tech lead. Now, design lead will see the estimation of time, all the efforts required, and give it to the designer, let's say UXUI or a product designer. Similarly, the tech lead will estimate the values, and that can be done on the basis of the wireframes. So
Mhm.
that's why developer has to have an overall understanding of how many screens are going to be there, how many interaction that you're putting, how many micro illustration that you want to put it, how many number of screens and click stats are over there. So that's why if you're creating something that is hypothetical and it's not going to be feasible in terms of the timeline, so it will eventually increase the amount of time and fall back to the constraints. So that's why you always have an early stage ideation. Like in Rebel Foods, what I used to do is I used to have a workshop for design development understanding. So once I get a problem statement, I create some solution, very rough sketches. I'll get all the development team, design team, and product manager team on the same page in the same video call, and I'll give a small walkthrough. Hey, this is what the problem statement is all about. This is what is expected out of it, and this is what I'm thinking. So any questions, anything right now? So people will ask starting question. Hey, why are you doing this? Why can't we do that? This will take good amount of time to develop. Are you doing it at 2x also, 1x also, Android also, iOS also? Why you're not keeping it consistent to website and Android so that I can reduce the amount of development time? So there are so many constraints that comes out and leads to an optimized solution. Because if you actually do the entire process very well and then you go back to the developer and then there is some issues, it's going to take you a lot of time. And product based company, you don't have that amount of time because you have fixed time to launch a product, 3 months as a quarter. Within a quarter you have to launch specific products and features going forward. So that's why, to make sure that the overall efforts is not redundant, you're not doing the same iteration, like something that's going to waste your time, not doing it all over again. So that's why it's very important to have a collaborative effort with your developer so that he or she has the entire idea of what you're developing.
Great. I think that answers the next question also to an extent, I
Mm.
believe. So that is a lack of communication and collaboration between design and development team, which most probably leads to what is say experiencing a friction kind of thing. If I'm not wrong, right?
Exactly. It happens. It happens. And that's the main reason that no matter how you are working, as you're working as a UX designer, senior UX designer, product designer, it's your right to talk to people. Because every time if you see any of my workshop, people say, what are the three important skills to learn? I always say communication, collaboration, problem solving skill. You can see any of my video. And where is he also last time I said, these are the
Yep.
three things I need to get started with. So collaboration is your right as a designer. You can't do single-handedly anything. So that's why you need to collaborate with your developer in the very early stage. Like if you, for example, what I usually like to do is I want to know the timeline at which the development is going to be live. So there is something called as a sprint, which is a 1 week sprint there the developer is going to start designing. So I will ask them, when are you starting the development? So let's say they'll say 25th of June. So what I'll make sure I'll have a buffer space of 1 week, and within before that 1 week I'm going to make sure all my designs are ready and I ship to the developer, so that for a 1 week I can do all the hands over, walkthrough, prototyping, and explaining everything to the developer before getting started to the development cycle. So that's why it's very important. Even if you get the problem statement, you can go back and skin to the developer and say, hey, do you think it's possible, feasible to do within 3 weeks or a 1 month? If you can do it collaboratively, that's the benefit of a product-based company or a services company. The efforts are collaboratively. So if let's say 7 out of 10 people think it's not possible right now, only stakeholders think this is possible, we go back very confidently say, sir, this is not going to be possible and it doesn't really make any sense to give a suboptimal solution. So let's just take, either we just reduce the scope of the project or we increase the timeline. And that's what collaboration helps you to bring all about it.
Okay, great, Anirudh. So, which brings to the next question, which is on collaboration itself. So,
Mhm.
creating an environment of collaboration in which there is a common language, is it important? Is it necessary?
Creating an
Creating an environment of collaboration in which there is a common language, a language barrier or something. Is it
uh,
necessary?
I would say definitely this is necessary, because what happens is, let's say, it's all about collaboration is all about communicating your ideas, communicating your thought process. If
Mhm.
you're doing that via some language which I don't understand or some language that you don't understand, it's going to be a huge very huge bracket onto there. It's going to create a huge breach to it, and you have to make sure that you go forward. So the best what you can do is make sure that make sure that you there's a common language that you work on it. Because even if I work at a, let's say, company in Berlin or Germany,
Mhm.
if they are doing some other Spanish language that I don't understand, and I have so many design thought process to me, how do I communicate to them? Every single time I do translation, do this, do that. Even if I tell them this is the final screen, it's not important. Okay, the more important thing is that I need to communicate my thought process behind that screen, that hey, why do I think it is right? If a product manager comes and say this is not an optimal solution, I would say I'll take a chance to take moment and sell my design via my communication skills, that this is the XYZ reason why which this is an optimal solution. That's why language barrier, you have to overcome it and make sure that you go into community. And there are accessibility tools available via which you can communicate. But if you have the will to work, there's going to be a turnaround right over there to overcome these issues. Always just first focus on your skills right now. Second thing, everything can be taken care of.
Great, great, great. That answers. And coming back to the next question, how developer can minimize development time and reduce coding time of complex UI and accelerate team productivity?
Awesome. That's a very nice question. Very, very nice question. So what happens is every time I create a, let's say UI or UI design, what I say all my mentees is that, you need to make sure that you create design in a way, like there is a step to do the UX process also. The steps to do the UI process will always start with sketching, wireframing, then visual design. Now visual design will have your branding, your
Sorry, Anirudh. I think there is an audience who didn't had a proper understanding of wire design. So can you just give him an idea on that?
the communication part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, having a common language is always
No,
going to
no.
be.
You have informed about the wireframe, right?
Mhm.
So the person doesn't know what exactly is a wireframe.
Oh, so basically what happens is, let's say you're designing an application, any Android or iOS app, you did all the research and now you want to create the screens. So what happens to create the screen? We firstly have a grid book and we go forward and design our screens into grid book by just roughly sketching some idea. And once that sketching is done on a physical notebook, let's say any random white or black blank papers, and then you convert that entire sketches into a digital format, which is a very low fidelity. You don't have to go padding, margin, spacing, color, typography, all your constraint layout preposition, and that's what it's a low fidelity wireframe. So wireframe is nothing but a digital representation of your sketch in a digital product. So that is what wireframes is all about.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Moving back to the
So
same question.
moving back to the same question, the process for UI, I'll come back to the developer part. The
Mhm.
process for UI will always be you dot with sketches, you do the wireframing. Then once you start the visual design, there's a good number of steps that you need to do it before you start the UI itself. So it's not just about developer, it's also about UI designers also. The moment you have all the research done, the first step would be to understand the color psychology, mood boards, go forward and define all the brand colors, define all the type scale typography, number of headings, number of body text, number of, let's say, button sizes of the button, then define all the buttons and the UI components. So if you define your style guide or your component library as, say, this is my button, this is how it's going to look in a click state, disable state, enable state, primary button, secondary button. Similarly, you create all your input selection states, your card, your visual element, everything that you're going to put at, let's say, bottom navigation, top navigation, create it as a style guide or a create component. Now once everything is created, now you get started with your UI design, because all the components are ready. You just want to drag drop and put it over here. You want a top navigation, drag drop the component. You want to create a text, there is heading 6 already defined. And same goes with the developer. You first provide the entire style guide to the developer, your UI component. So what will happen is they will go forward and create all your typography, all your colors, all your UI components, all your clickable states. They will define their style guides in CSS, which can easily be copy pasted by Zeppelin. That's what I told in the beginning also. So now that they have an entire design system ready, now if they want to create a screen, they will just call a function called button, an entire button will be on there. So that's how your overall redundancy is also reduced, your timeline is also saved, and every time you have a complex UI, he can break the entire complex UI into buttons, typographic, text, and image, which is already developed as a design style guide or a UI component. And that's how you reduce the overall complexity of a project for development.
Great, great. I think that answers. Any questions from the user?
Any other question that we have, guys?
Uh, Madhavat answers. Yashwant, I guess. Yeah. So what the S letter means in SDV?
SVG, which is scalable vector graph.
SVG. Yeah.
Scalable
Vector
vector
graph. You
graphics.
have
Yeah.
rearranged it, I guess.
Okay, cool, cool. So, which means it's just a digital product. It's a vector image. So, best about so when you talk about PNG and JPEG, it's a raster image, RASTER, raster image. So, raster image, once you stretch it, it pixelates, it's break to its color, right? But if you do anything with vector images, you scale it to the moon, you scale it to the Mars, it's not going to break. The UI is going to be consistent. So, scalable vector images.
Okay, great. I think which brings to our last question of this Q&A, that is any take on common pitfalls of any handover?
Mhm. So a lot of time what happens is common pitfalls that I have also faced that, the timelines are very stringent. You need to provide the entire product within a week or so. So if you don't actually keep your entire roadmap or the Gantt chart, which is the timeline, the roadmap of the product, if you don't keep that in mind and you work in a direction where you don't cope up the timelines, it's going to have a mess up because now you have less amount of time. You didn't manage your time properly, and in hurry you will forget to export so many icons on illustrations on your Figma file. You'll export it directly. You will forget to put your style guide. You'll forget to replace all your normal local components with your clickable components and design system, and you're gonna export something that is not as a component which you have already defined. You're gonna skip on all the wireframe. You're gonna skip on all the clickable prototype. You'll be like, hey, let's just come in. I'm gonna give you the walkthrough of the project. So how many times can I remember the entire flow as a developer, right? I'm gonna forget it because I have so many things to worry about. So that's why always manage the timeline. And like I told you, always have a buffer space of 1 week. So if the development is going on 23rd of June, have a minus 1 week. Before that thing, your entire development design has to be developed, and that 1 week can be utilized a day or two for prototyping, a day or two or handover, a day or two for entire explaining the entire project to the developer, and only then you make sure that the project is development is started. Because otherwise around, if the developer don't have the larger context of the problem statement that they have solved, he is gonna go haywire over it. So that's why that's the most common pitfall that I have.
Great, great, great. That answers, I believe. And there is one question from Joshna. Joshna asks, "What is your education background?" I think if I can answer, that is BTech Information Science, right?
Right. So, Joshna, I was an engineer. I did my BE from Thakur College of Engineering as an IT developer. So, software engineering is what I've done. So, I was developer for a couple of years, a full stack developer. I used to do front end development, back end development. Everything that I explained right now, I used to do it. And after that, I transited my entire career into UI UX. I started from scratch. I self-learned everything from UX designer intern. Literally started from intern, and today head of product design at a US company, like sitting over and making in dollars. That's the power of your UX design right now. It allows you to get a global opportunity irrespective of what your domain is all about. It doesn't really matter what you're studying, medical, finance, BCA, BDA, whatever you're studying, it doesn't really matter. Just acquire the skill, just get good amount of experience, just be good at collaboration, communication, and problem solving, and tada, you can crack into UX within 3 to 6 months.
Great, great, Anirudh. I think that was my next question, which was related to UI UX itself, because as it is a booming technology and everywhere it is drastically, people are getting what do you say, importance of this particular what do you say, UI UX part, right? Along with the software engineering development, how it had created a trend in the market previously and currently. So, any suggestions that you would like to give to audience who are planning, let's say, if they have shown their interest in terms of UI UX, and if they are confused to go for it or to not, should I give it a try or not? Anything that you can inform them.
Definitely, it's a very nice career. The first thing I would like to talk about is that most of the career that we have right now, it becomes stagnated or redundant after a amount of time. You're doing same thing all over again, and it becomes saturated after a couple of years of time. The best part about UX UI design that I found out was there's so many steps to reach from a problem statement to a solution. So many steps, right? There are like literally, let's say UX design, UI design, there's visual design, there's research, user research, there is design thinking processes, there is information architecture, user flow, user journey. So at every single week you are doing something new. Today you are doing information architecture, tomorrow you are doing your all your UI flows, next day other thing you are doing all your affinity mapping, then you're doing your empathy mapping, then you're doing sketches, then you're doing UI, then you're doing collaboration developer. So this field has so much of diversification itself in one single problem statement that it will always keep you on the pick of your mind by constantly making you to think about things that you're doing right now, always let you know that you need to take an informed decision, and it personally also evolves you as a literally very radical thinker, which you behave in such a way that you always have a reason behind whatever you're doing. So that's the best thing I think. If you guys are into it, you want to like solve next billion users problem statement and work closely and impact others life and give it back to the community, this is a good thing. And to get started with, I will definitely recommend you to like find a mentor to yourself, find a course somewhere, identify by yourself. Don't ask to people, because something that is good to me not necessarily is going to be good to you. I personally am a kind of person, I like to do self studies. I invest in books. I haven't invested in any course till to date. I have done whatever I've done by LinkedIn or so and so forth, smaller courses back in time. So invest in courses, make sure that buy a lot of books, go and connect to the mentorship who is available, Go and identify people on LinkedIn, talk to them, and make your own roadmap to get into the UX UI design. Resources are plenty. If you are literally excited and literally very anxious about getting into UX UI design, you can crack it within 3 to 6 months. It's not that within 6 months you become a very good UX designer, but you can actually kickstart your UX career. As a UX designer intern, you can start from scratch, start doing smaller things, and then grow your scale up to your product designer or lead product designer. So definitely yes.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Anirudh, for answering that in a specific way that student can understand, and if they're interested, definitely, I think audience, you can definitely go for it. That is, UI UX is the one which has a huge market currently, and yep, I think which brings to the end of this particular webinar. Anything else, Anirudh, that you want to mention to the viewers before we wind it up?
Not much. Just stay consistent. Have a discipline with whatever that you do. Motivation is not going to help you. Just say salary is a motivation. Let's say somebody's owning a car or working in US company should not be the motivation. Just stay, have discipline in your life. Manage your entire workflow properly. Have your calendar schedule. Give specific amount of time to learning. Specific amount of time to spend and research something. Specific amount of time to just chill and relax back. Once you have your life in your discipline, it's not just UX. Any field that you want to crack, you can do it. Don't go behind motivation, just run behind discipline. That's all I can say, and you can
Great.
quickly crack this design field.
Great, great. That was a great note on ending the webinar, Anirudh. Thank you so much for your time, Anirudh, again, and sparing 1 hour with our audience to give them a better insights on UI UX. And today's, I believe, today's topic was also more informative in terms of
Yeah.
understanding it and in terms of getting the greater knowledge on that. Thank you again, Anirudh,
Yeah.
for being here, and thank you all audience for sparing your time. And one thing that I would like to add, that is skill sets does matter, right? Just concentrate on your upgradation of skill sets and improvise every time, each and every time, so that you won't be outdated. So that's all from my end. It's Ajay Bilaf, and you can definitely check out Anirudh's social media handle. That is, I'll be sharing Anirudh's LinkedIn handle in the chat. You can definitely check him out, and he would provide what to say, these kind of talks in the future also with Versio, and he provides a lot of insights to the viewers audience, and he would be eager to answer you over LinkedIn also, I believe. So yep, so and you can subscribe to Versio also for these kind of talks. We come up with these niche topics, and which audience would have also interest to attend. And if you feel like attending similar kind of talks on UI UX in the future, please let us know what you want to hear about, what things that you are interested in, so that we can definitely arrange a meeting or else a webinar on that. So that's all from my end, guys. You can stay tuned, check out the social media handles of Versio and Anirudh also. That's all from my end. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening. That's all from my end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Have an awesome weekend. Take care. Bye bye. Bye,
Thank you.
Ajay.
Bye bye, Anirudh. Thank you so much. Guys, that's all. I think we would be ending this webinar. If you have anything to ask or any important topics that you want to know about, you can definitely write it to us at support@redverge.com, or else you can check out our social media handles, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram pages. We do post similar kind of podcast, webinars, and upcoming informations about the talks that we are conducting. So that's all. It's Ajay Billam here, signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Visit verzeo.com, subscribe to our channel to know more. Thank you.